wisdom to believe that you are able to do for them more than they can ask or imagine, according to your power working in and through them. We pray in your merciful name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., September 5th, 2023. To the Senate, under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Peter Welch, a senator from the state of Vermont, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Patty Murray, President pro tempore.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to resume consideration of the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, Federal Reserve System, Philip Nathan Jefferson of North Carolina to be Vice Chairman of the Board of Governors.
Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
First, welcome back, Mr. President, to you and our great staff, and it's good to be back. Leader McConnell will speak after me here on the floor, and I'm glad to see him back and doing well. Mr. President, let me begin by welcoming all of our senators back from August work period. August was a busy month for all of us back home, a time to listen to constituents about what's on their minds, like lowering costs and increasing paychecks. It was also a time for ribbon cuttings, groundbreakings, as the historic investments that Democrats made come to fruition. And of course, it was a time to prepare for the very busy month in front of us. On the implementation side, August was a month of action, of groundbreakings, of celebrating new factories and new good-paying jobs that will stick around for a long, long time. When a parent sees his or her son or daughter get these jobs, they know they're going to be around for a long time, not going to be gone in 2-3 years. It's a great thing for optimism and the future of America. And it was even nice to see Speaker McCarthy in my home state of New York, celebrating the new jobs secured by Democrats when he visited JMA Wireless last month. I've been there many times, too. In fact, it was from my own visits there and to other companies across New York that I saw firsthand the opportunity to invest in companies like JMA by Buy in America provisions that we added to the legislation, and it helped us shape the Inflation Reduction Act. As the Speaker saw with his own eyes, Democrats' investments are already bearing fruit. In just 1 year alone, the Inflation Reduction Act has resulted in over 200 new clean energy jobs and created 170,000 new good-paying jobs. In just 1 year, the Inflation Reduction Act alone has resulted in over 200 new clean energy projects and created over 170,000 new good-paying jobs. And it's projected to create another 1.5 million jobs over the next decade. Pick any region of the country, and you'll have no trouble seeing Democrats' agenda in action. One of the amazing visits I went to was in Allegheny County in upstate New York. It's in Appalachia. By income levels, it's one of the poorest counties in our state. And there, the Inflation Reduction Act is blowing new life into Lundstrom. This was a company that used to make coal technology equipment and has transitioned to making parts for wind turbines and is hiring 150 new workers, all in a place where people thought they didn't have much of a history because they knew the coal industry was declining. It's happened all over America. In Georgia, Hyundai and LG announced they're increasing their multi-billion-dollar investment towards a major EV and battery manufacturing plant, one that will be the state's largest project ever, creating thousands of good-paying jobs in years to come. And in New Mexico, Arcosa broke ground on a new wind tower production facility expected to create 250 new jobs. These jobs will help fill the over $1 billion worth of wind tower orders they have received since President Biden signed the IRA law. These investments, and many others, are supporting the whole of America, red and blue states, rural and urban, everyone, everywhere. And you can be sure, Mr. President, the best is yet to come. Last month, we saw other examples of implementation, too. Over the past few weeks, President Biden made groundbreaking announcements on lowering the cost of prescription drugs, on prevailing wage, and more. Many of these are a direct result of the work that we have done in the Congress. So Democrats are very proud of the agenda now taking hold across America, and we intend to keep going. Now, the Senate gavels back into session with a lot to do, but there is one clear place to begin. Keep the government open. As we all know, government funding is set to expire on September 30th. By the end of this month, the House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans, all must get on the same page about keeping the government open and avoiding a pointless shutdown, a shutdown that will hurt just about every single American, a shutdown that, of course, shouldn't happen. To accomplish that, the answer is very simple. All sides must work together in good faith without engaging in extremist or all-or-nothing tactics. Look no further than the example we've set here in a bipartisan way in the Senate. Democrats working with Republicans on a bipartisan basis. Chairs, Democratic chairs, engaging fruitfully with Republican vice chairs and ranking members. All 12 appropriation bills have been reported out of committee with bipartisan support, some of them unanimously. Both sides avoided dragging the process down with unseemly tactics. It sets a very good template for how things should work in Congress. I want to thank all my colleagues, but especially Appropriations Chair Patty Murray and Vice Chair Susan Collins, for their tremendous work thus far on the appropriations process. They truly deserve a lot of credit. When the House returns next week, I hope House Republicans, I implore House Republicans, to recognize that time is short to keep the government open and that the only way we will finish the appropriations process is through bipartisanship. The idea of both parties working together, not one party, particularly a party governed by an extreme 30 or 40 members, filling out a wish list that they know can't pass. Can't do that. So let me repeat, let me say it again. The only way to avoid a shutdown is through bipartisanship. So I plead with House Republican leadership to follow the Senate's lead and pass bipartisan Democrat and Republican appropriation bills supported by both parties. And as we work to fund the government, there are plenty other things we must do too, both on and off the floor. We will continue, for one, continue laying a foundation for bipartisan congressional action on AI. Next Wednesday, along with Senators Rounds, Heinrich, and Young, I will host the Senate's inaugural AI Insight Forum, a first-ever convening of the top minds in AI here in the Congress. Voices from business and civil rights community, researchers, worker advocates, and many more, all in one room, having an open discussion about how Congress can act on AI, where to start, what questions to ask, and how to build a foundation for safe AI innovation. These IA forums are vital. Artificial intelligence is unlike any topic we've undertaken in Congress. It moves faster, it is more complex, and there is little precedent for this kind of work. This is not going to be easy. In fact, it will be one of the most difficult things we undertake. But in the 21st century, as technology moves forward with or without us, we cannot behave like ostriches with heads in the sand when it comes to AI. We must treat AI with the same level of seriousness as national security, as job creation, as our civil liberties. Now, ultimately, of course, the real legislative work will come in committees. But the AI forums will give us the nutrient agar, the facts and the challenges that we need to understand in order to reach this goal. Of course, next week's forum is just the start. The Senate will continue hosting AI forums throughout the fall on a variety of topics, including finding ways to promote AI innovation, IP issues, workforce issues, privacy, security, alignment, and many more. We will also move the ball forward on other items on our agenda, wherever we can. But of course, they will need Republican help to reach the necessary 60 votes to move forward, like lowering the cost of insulin and prescription drugs, something members on both sides of the aisle are hard at work on. We did it in the IRA for insulin for Medicare for people over 65. We should do it for everybody else. Insulin is too vital and becoming too expensive for too many Americans. And making progress on cannabis through the Safe Banking Act, as well as common sense rail safety, which I said in July will be a big priority. We also must build on the work we did during the NDAA to outcompete the Chinese government, to keep the American people safe, to protect American businesses, and ensure that American innovation and technology leads the way this century. We also must continue standing with our friends in Ukraine, now more than ever, as the counteroffensive against Putin's forces is in full swing. And we must stand with our fellow Americans in places like Hawaii, Florida, Vermont, and other regions battered by storms and fires and flooding. And the topics continue, from advancing a farm bill to kids' online privacy to reauthorizing the FAA to holding bank executives accountable for irresponsible behavior. Our committees have done excellent work to move all of these issues along, but we are under no illusion that we can make progress on the Senate floor unless we get bipartisan cooperation. None of this will be easy either. The bills will require a lot of work and compromise, but if we can progress on these items, we will greatly improve the lives of average Americans. Finding bipartisan compromise on issues like these is never easy, but that's what it'll take to get things done. And our efforts to do precisely that have already led to significant accomplishments under this majority. As we gavel back in, we will keep going to reward the trust the American people have placed in us. And finally, on Jack Lew. Earlier today, President Biden announced he's nominated Jack Lew as the next U.S. ambassador to Israel. Israel is one of America's most important allies and will remain an essential partner in the years ahead on security, tech innovation, and cultural ties. So it's vital we have a strong American ambassador in Jerusalem. Mr. Lew is precisely the person for the job of ambassador to Israel that we need. As former Treasury Secretary and Chief of Staff under President Obama, he'll bring a wealth of experience, of diplomatic skill, that will ensure the partnership between the U.S. and Israel, assure that it remains strong. And you know why else I know Jack Lew will do a great job? He's a proud Queens boy and a graduate of Forest Hills High School, which I used to represent in Congress. I commend President Biden for nominating Mr. Lew, and I look forward to his nomination here in the Senate. I yield the floor.
Clerk will call the roll. Ms. Baldwin.
Mr. President.
Republican Leader.
I ask consent that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
And well, Mr. President, I'm glad to welcome our colleagues back from the August work period. Spending time back in our states with the folks we represent isn't just part of our job. More than anything else, it's what allows us to be effective here in Washington. Now, one particular moment of my time back home has received its fair share of attention in the press over the past week. But I assure you, August was a busy and productive month for me and my staff back in the Commonwealth. I kicked off the month in West Kentucky and then in my hometown of Louisville, where I met with small businesses and community leaders. We had a candid conversation on the critical issues facing our state, from relentless inflation, straining families and business owners, to the challenge of finding workers in a lagging labor market. I also had a chance to travel to the eastern part of Kentucky, where I met with healthcare and recovery workers in Manchester. Tragically, the substance abuse crisis has become even deadlier in recent years, especially in my home state. So we discussed what we're doing to combat it and find ways the federal government can fill the gaps. I also welcomed Dr. Rahul Gupta, the National Drug Czar, back to the Commonwealth to hear more about what we're doing to fight back against addiction. I look forward to continuing working with Dr. Gupta to make Kentucky a safe and healthier place. Throughout the month, I was pleased to see over $6 million go toward addressing the opioid crisis at home. This federal funding will go a long way in supporting programs that offer a lifeline to countless Kentuckians who struggle with substance abuse. In Bowling Green, I met with community bankers to discuss what Senate Republicans are doing to put a check on the Biden administration's reckless spending and regulatory overreach. At the Kentucky State Fair, I had a chance to indulge in some of the best that the Bluegrass has to offer, like the Farm Bureau's famous ham breakfast. This event is a highlight of mine every August, and this year was no exception. I met with farmers from across the state to discuss their priorities and concerns as Congress takes up the all-important Farm Bill. This input will be vital to our work here in the Senate in the months ahead. In northern Kentucky, I wrapped up the month with local business leaders to talk about some of our landmark infrastructure investments underway in the state, like overhauling the Brent Spence Bridge and revitalizing our river ports and railroads. From rural farm families to businesses of all sizes, every Kentuckian I met voiced the same message. There's too much government and too little being done to boost the economy and help everyday people. So as the Senate gets back to work in Washington, I'll keep these conversations and concerns in the forefront of my mind. This month, of course, Congress needs to address our nation's most pressing needs with timely appropriations, and we need to keep the lights on come October 1st. Back in January, I pointed out that Washington Democrats, the new normal they faced, the American people had elected divided government and demanded that we work together on our most basic governing responsibilities. Well, as I've reminded our colleagues regularly since then, that meant funding the government through regular order. It's been encouraging to see Senator Collins, Senator Murray, and our colleagues on the Appropriations Committee make serious headway in that direction. And next week, we'll aim to pass the first batch of their work out here on the floor. I've also made clear that the Senate's top priority must be keeping the American people safe. And this month we'll have a chance to do that with supplemental appropriations for urgent national security and disaster relief priorities. We need to continue to invest in America's defense industrial base, both to support our partners in today's fight and to help our forces deter tomorrow's threats. And as our colleagues from Florida and Hawaii know all too well, emergency personnel are working overtime to help communities shattered by natural disasters over the summer. So the Senate reconvenes with our work cut out for us and a deadline fast approaching. I hope each of our colleagues has returned ready to do their part.
Mr. President.
Senator from Illinois.
Mr. President,
Democratic.
I was here for the presentation by the Republican leader, and I'm happy that he returned. I told him it was great to see him back, and I couldn't wait to disagree with him. And I'm sure I'll have that opportunity in the near future. Mr. President, I spent the August recess crisscrossing the state of Illinois. It's a pretty big operation. One tip to the other, about 350 miles. And couple hundred miles across. And I tried to make a point of not only visiting the population center, Chicago, and the suburbs around it, but to get downstate too. And my focus downstate was to visit small towns in rural areas and to go to the hospitals and to sit down with the administrator and ask him what was going on with that local hospital. You know this from the state you represent, Mr. President. These small town hospitals are really the lifeline for these communities. They're great sources of pride. They're great sources of employment. They're there for critical medical care, and God forbid you lose one. It really is devastating to a community. And I found as I went around the state and sat down with hospital leaders and public health officials and other healthcare providers, several messages came through loud and clear. We spoke about the struggling rural hospitals, and it applies to the hospitals in urban areas as well. Not only lifelines for emergency medical care, they are the backbone of the local economy in these communities. But nationwide, rural hospitals in particular are really struggling. Half operate in the red. They're losing money. And more than 300 across the nation are at immediate risk of closure. I had a memorable visit to Iroquois County, Illinois. Now that's south of Chicago, south of Kankakee. And I went to the hospital that has been there for decades and a great source of pride. They really worried when they contacted our office that they wouldn't be able to keep the lights on in that hospital. So we worked to help them obtain something called critical access hospital status under Medicare. And several of the community leaders, when I went there to make the announcement that they'd been approved, said, we saved the hospital with that common effort. Now, I have a bipartisan bill with Senator James Lankford. Senator Lankford and I are as opposite politically as they come in this chamber. He's a Republican of Oklahoma and very conservative. but he has joined me in extending the lifeline to additional rural hospitals facing closure. Our bill will create some flexibility around the strict federal definitions that a hospital must be literally 35 miles or more away from others to qualify for payment designation. Senator Lankford and I believe that characteristics of the hospital and its role in the community should also be factors in determining eligibility. I hope the Finance Committee will take this up now and take it seriously. We can save dozens of hospitals nationwide, preserving vital access to patients in rural areas. But my number one takeaway from hospitals in the city of Chicago, the suburbs, and downstate was very simple. We are facing a dramatic shortage of healthcare providers. Doctors, nurses, dentists, mental health providers, EMTs, and lab techs. Across the country, we face a shortfall of 120,000 doctors over the next 10 years. A recent survey found that 100,000 doctors left the field during pandemic, and another 800,000 planning to retire soon. This is particularly dire in rural communities. I do want to give a shout out to Illinois State University, located in Bloomington Normal. They just opened a nursing school in my hometown of Springfield, Illinois. It's called the Mennonite School of Nursing. It has a great reputation, and it's going to be a success, I'm sure, because we need them desperately. And they anticipate graduating over 90 nurses a year. We need them in Central Illinois. In every single Illinois rural county, every one, we face a shortage of medical professionals. For example, mental health providers and recovery experts. And while there are 90 doctors per 100,000 residents in the urban parts of my state, in the rural counties, we have only 45 physicians for every 100,000. That's 50%. What's the consequence of this shortage of medical professionals? It's very real and it's very personal. We have a new mayor in Carbondale, Illinois. Her name is Carolyn Harvey. She worked for Southern Illinois University at Carbondale for her working life, retired there, and then went to work on the city council and became the mayor. I sat down with Mayor Harvey and I said to her, okay, you have the United States Senator sitting in your mayor's office in Carbondale, Illinois. What's your ask? Everybody has one. She shocked me. Her ask was not for money. It wasn't for anything particular to the community infrastructure. She said one thing: we need dentists for children, pediatric dentistry. I heard from Shawnee Health, which is the community health clinic in her hometown of Carbondale. They treat nearly 50,000 low-income patients each year. Just for the record, that's 1,000 a month that they are treating in this clinic. They recently, after the pandemic, lost 15 oral health professionals. They have a waiting list of 120 children to access dental care, most of whom are under the age of 8. This means that a 3-year-old girl in Southern Illinois who has trouble sleeping because of severe tooth decay has to wait more than 1 year for treatment. What does treatment consist of at the end of waiting for a year for a little kid? It consists of going into an operating room in a hospital under general anesthesia, and they find a medical professional to extract a bad tooth. Think of the complications, the drama that are part of regular oral care in that region. Here's another story they shared with me about a 4-year-old boy who had an abscessed tooth. Ever had a toothache? Need a dentist? Have a kid at home that couldn't sleep because of a toothache? You won't forget it, Mom and Pop. I don't. It's part of life that you hate to go through. You have as much pain as they do just watching him suffer. Now imagine this one, if you will. He's 4 years old. His mother tried for months to get him into a dentist who could relieve his pain, but he was unable to see someone. The family was from outside the general service area of Carbondale, and they had to travel several hours for every appointment. Plus, the mother just couldn't take time off work to bring her son to all the appointments. The little boy was visibly nervous and afraid, as most 4-year-olds would be, but he was in pain, and he knew he needed help. After the procedure was completed, the young boy began to cry, and the dentist asked him, "What's wrong?" And all the little boy could say was, "Thank you." Not only was his pain gone, but the stressful journeys back and forth for the appointments were ending as well. 4 years old. How is this suffering possible in my state of Illinois and in this great nation? Well, first, the United States ranks 43rd in the world for the number of dentists per capita. 43rd in the world. It's particularly outrageous in rural areas. In Illinois, 10 of our 102 counties have one dentist. In Lawrence County, Illinois, there's only one dentist for 15,000 people. 15,000. That's 11 times worse than the national average. These statistics should ring alarm bells in Washington. Now, I've been in the Senate a few years and in Congress a few years before that. And I've said many times, I gotta be careful when I say I'm gonna do something about this, but I'm sure as hell gonna try. When I think about that little boy waiting for a year for dental care, it's unimaginable to me as a father and grandfather. So I'm challenging myself, the Illinois delegation, our federal government, the Illinois Dental Society, and all the elected officials in this end of my state to come together, put politics over here, and do something about dental services. Mayor Harvey of Carbondale, Illinois is right. This is beneath the dignity of a great nation to have this sort of thing in our borders. Thankfully, there's a federal program that might help. It's called the National Health Service Corps. It provides scholarships and loan repayments to doctors, nurses, dentists, mental health providers who work in areas of need. It is the primary federal program intended to build a pipeline of healthcare providers and address shortages. I recently met Dr. Dana Ray, first-generation college graduate and the chief medical officer of Crossing Health in Decatur. She told me that the only reason she was able to pursue her career was the loan repayment offered by the National Health Service Corps. You see, it costs a fortune to go to medical school or dental school, and they literally graduate with debts of $100,000, $200,000 and up. And then they have to take the job to pay off their loans. That's obvious. Can they go to the areas of great need? They can't get paid as much there. National Health Service Corps makes loan forgiveness part of the program. If you'll come to a community that needs a dentist, needs a doctor, we'll forgive your loan. And I'll make another mention while we're on the subject here. Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee and I have a bill. The current National Health Service Corps program provides up to $50,000 loan forgiveness if you'll sign up for 2 years. Well, she and I want to add to that and create an incentive for those who would do 5 years in a community, and they would have up to $200,000 of debt forgiven. Why 5 years? We happen to believe that dentists and doctors who practice in an area for that period of time will develop an attachment to it, start to think in terms of their family and their future there as well. So they're likely to stay after the 5 years is over. Another bipartisan bill. Senator Blackburn's a Republican, conservative from Tennessee, but we see eye to eye on this. The National Health Service Corps is the strongest program we have in America to tackle the shortage of dentists, doctors, and nurses. The Senate Health Committee is negotiating on this program now, and I urge my Republican colleagues to join Democrats and do something. And let me add while we're at it, there are many health professionals around the world who desperately want to come to the United States. You know who they are. You see them in the hospitals. They're foreign-born physicians and medical professionals and nurses who come here, and they're there in our moment of need. We have a program to do that, but the program is too small, and it doesn't allow as many to come to this country who are qualified and ready to serve as it should. What does it mean to a hospital in a rural area to lose nurses? Here's an example I was given when I visited one of these hospitals. They had 4 critical care nurses. 2 of them announced they were leaving. Why were they leaving? Because they were going to become traveling nurses. They'll go to hospitals around the country and be paid 2 or 3 times as much as they were at this hospital. The hospital stepped back and took a look at it and said, if they leave, it's going to threaten the future of our emergency room and the future of many of our departments, these critical care nurses. They offered him a generous financial incentive to stay, and he stayed. The hospital said it was an easy calculation to make, how much more we need to pay in bonuses versus shutting down critical services in our hospital for a year because of lack of nurses. That is the reality of what hospitals are facing all over the United States, not just nurses, but many other medical professions. While we're at it, I also want to put in a word for the rural EMS agencies, first responders that we all depend on. A few years ago, I had a visit from Mark Kennedy. He's an emergency medical technician from Nauvoo, Illinois. In his county, in Hancock County, his ambulance service is critical. It's life and death to get people to the nearby hospitals 40 or 50 miles away. He told me about challenges that they had with their volunteers, by and large, running this agency, this ambulance agency, and keeping up with the equipment that's needed to make sure that they could save lives. So I joined with then Senator Pat Roberts of Kansas, who was the ranking Republican on the Senate Farm Ag Committee that was writing the Farm Bill. I convinced Pat Roberts to look the other way on the question of jurisdiction and to put this bill that we called the Siren Act into the bill, into the Farm Bill, as a possible way of helping rural communities. We have now enacted it into law through Senator Roberts' efforts and my own, and we have sent $38 million to emergency medical service agencies across America, including many in my state, but all across the United States. This is an equally important part of medical care in our future. Now that Senator Roberts is retired, Senator Susan Collins and I are doing the bill together again on a bipartisan basis to reauthorize this program. I ask any senator who has a question as to whether this is money well spent, contact that ambulance service in your own state and ask them what it means to have up-to-date equipment to save the lives of people that they're called on to help. I hope we can pass it out of the Senate this month. Mr. President, the solutions to many of our pressing healthcare challenges are at hand. The question is whether we can find a bipartisan commitment to move them forward. After the month of August, which I journeyed around my state, I sincerely hope that we can. I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call a roll.
Ms. Baldwin.